Good afternoon. This is Anthony Harris. I'm the interim dean of the College of Education at Prairie View A&M University, a position I have had the privilege of serving in starting my second year this fall semester. And I am delighted to have been invited to speak with students about writing and some of my experiences in writing with passion, dealing with issues of social justice. And I apologize for missing the scheduled lecture. Something came up and I could not get out of it, so I extend my apologies to all the students for not being there at the appointed time. I know you made some sacrifices and made your effort to be there, and for that I sincerely apologize. Talking about my passion for social justice begins with my upbringing in Mississippi during the Civil Rights Movement. During that time, I was a child growing up in the 60s, and getting involved with the Civil Rights Movement was a fairly, almost a natural kind of occurrence for me because of my mother. My mother was an icon in the Civil Rights Movement and made sure that any events going on, whether they were marches, demonstrations, pickets, or whatever, she made sure her three sons were near her, by her side, and we had to we had the opportunity to experience viscerally and otherwise how much of a historical moment that was. And I have so many stories to tell about having been a participant in the Civil Rights Movement and being a product of the Civil Rights Movement in Mississippi. It has shaped my life, it's shaped my worldview, it has shaped my view of social justice, obviously, and racial justice, and made me a consistent and unwavering opponent of oppression, discrimination, prejudice in all of its forms. So I endeavor to match my behavior with my values, and that's not always easy to do. But one of the ways that I have done that is to begin writing. And one of the first books that I wrote was, the title of it was Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round. Now, if you're not familiar with that song, it's actually a gospel tune that was written back in many years ago, probably a century or so ago. But it's the title of the song, as I said, Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Round. And that's the title of my book, the first book that I wrote, Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around. And there's a book cover. If you look at the book cover, you will see there are three people on that book cover. It's a black and white photo. And if you're lucky and have a good memory and can remember your history, you will probably recognize at least one of those three people. I'll just tell you who they are. One is Pete Seeger, and if you're not familiar with Pete Seeger, Google him sometime and find out how important he was and what a life he lived. He was a strong champion for workers' rights, for student rights, and was just a phenomenal human being, and was an educator and did so much for the Civil Rights Movement. Two other photos in that cover. One is of me, and another one is of my dear friend who's passed away now, Ratio Jones. And Pete Seeger, along with so many other people, were in the South at that time in 1964 to be a part of what was called Freedom Summer. And if you're not familiar with Freedom Summer, I urge you to Google it, or better yet, take a look at a documentary done by Stanley Nelson called Freedom Summer. And if you pay close attention to that documentary, you'll see somebody you might recognize, because I'm one of the people featured in that PBS documentary, not CBS, but PBS documentary. It was on the program American Experience. And I just felt compelled. I felt compelled to tell my story, because that book is not a history of the Civil Rights Movement in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Instead, it's how I, from my perspective, through my lens, my view of what was going on around me, the feelings, the thoughts, as I recall later, what was going on in the movement and how it affected me. Because we did some things, my mom and dad and my brothers, we were involved in so many situations and pickets and marches and so forth that in many ways put our family at risk. Nevertheless, my parents were committed to change and committed to the movement. They simply did not let that deter them from doing what they needed to do. Now, why did I start writing about that? I have to give you a little bit of background on my writing. I took my freshman writing course, my freshman year of college at the University of Southern Mississippi. And my instructor for that course, found out later she was an adjunct professor, but I'm not putting down adjuncts, but she she brought the skills that she had, and she didn't like my writing. She didn't like my grammar. She didn't like anything that I wrote, punctuation, spelling. I mean, she just took off for so much, and basically sent a very clear message to me that I was not a very good writer. And I began to internalize that message from her, believing that I was actually not very good at writing. And it actually kept me from applying for a doctoral program at Southern Mississippi. The faculty in that department, after I finished my master's in '76, were encouraging me to apply for the doctoral program in counseling psychology, and they talked about a dissertation, having to write this huge paper, and I said, no, I don't think I'm very good at writing, so I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to not do that. So that was an example of how that internalization of that negative critique of me as a writer affected affected part of my career decision making. Because had I pursued the PhD at that time, there's no telling where my life would have taken me. But instead, in 1979, I did found the courage in 1979 and started my doctoral program at what's now Texas A&M University Commerce, used to be East Texas State University. At any rate, that's how I overcame that, because I developed an attitude that if you tell me I can't do something, my response is, watch me. I had developed enough confidence in myself and in my writing, actually, that I decided I have a story to tell too. And I wanted to combine my passion for storytelling, but also to convince myself and convince others that I had the skills and the ability to actually write and to communicate via the written word. So that was really important for me to get that done, and that particular writing project took a long time, and it's not over yet, because it was sort of a memoir or an autobiography, and I'm still here, and the story is still being told. About my life is still being lived out. So one of these days, I'm going to go back and add some things to that book to bring it up to date. I think at the time it probably ended around 2002 or 2003, and so much has changed since then, obviously. But getting the courage to write and having that conviction that we all have a story to tell. One of my heroes, and probably one of yours as well, is Dr. Maya Angelou. Something she said that really stuck with me, and I shared with others, and she said, there's nothing more agonizing than having an untold story inside of us. And I believe that we all have a story to tell. Somebody out there is waiting to hear your story. You may think nobody wants to hear my story, nobody cares about what I have to say. You're wrong about that. It may be one person, maybe two people, maybe some family members. I remember another book that I wrote called Gifts of Moments, being somebody to somebody. It was sort of a spiritually based self-help motivational kind of book, a very short read, less than 100 pages. And people who read that used to, they would send me emails and tell me how much that book helped them, how much that book helped them to gain new perspectives on something perhaps that they were going through. So I'm very proud of that moment, that I was able to do that. And I just encourage people to figure out a way to share their stories. Not everybody has to write a book, but you can do some journaling, you can do some lectures, you can do any number of things to let people know what your story is, because believe me, there's somebody out there who's looking for an answer to some issue that they're dealing with, and they may find that answer in your story. So that's how I got to write, motivated to write both those books, because all of my books have an overtone or an undertone of social justice. All of my characters in the fiction, the novels that I've written, they all have, all of those stories deal with race relations and class issues and so forth. And I've taken delight in being able to share those stories. I've written across a number of genres. I've written in children's books. I've written probably 5 or 6 children's books, a couple of chapter books, and 4 or 5 novels. I also wrote a biography of my mom after she passed away in 2014. I knew that there were people who did not know her, or if they did not know her history of being a foot soldier, an icon in the civil rights movement. So I put that book together so people could learn a little bit more about Daisy Harris. As I said, I've written in a couple of genres, and one in particular I wrote was my first children's book, and the title of that book was It's What's on the Inside. And just give you a background on what motivated me, what inspired me to write that particular book. It's the story of a young black girl who's in daycare, and she's probably 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, maybe 5 or 6 years old, because she had not started public school yet, but maybe 5 or 6 years old. And she was at this daycare center where there were mostly white kids there, and she and her brother were the only 2 black kids at this daycare center. And the father picked her up from daycare to bring her home one day. And as she got into the vehicle, her countenance was pretty low. She was not as talkative and as upbeat as she typically was. And the dad kept asking her, "What's wrong, sweetie? Why aren't you talking? Did you have a bad day?" And the little girl didn't want to say anything. She just looked out the window, and she was just not responding. So when the father and the daughter got home, the father kept asking her, "Sweetheart, what is wrong? You're not talking. Did something happen? Tell me what's going on." And the little girl finally decided, okay, here's what happened. She said, she told her dad and her mom that, "I don't want to be black anymore." "You don't want to be black anymore? Tell me why. What's up with that?" "Well, my little Tommy, my playmate, said he doesn't like black people and he can't play with me anymore." And tears started to well up in her eyes, because she was, there was nothing more important to her at the time than playing with her friend Tommy. And Tommy is not his real name. That's a pseudonym. At any rate, Tommy, the child, her name is Ashley. She's just really befuddled and disheartened by what her friend Tommy has told her. And the mother turns to the father and says, "All right, you're the civil rights guy. You have to handle this one. What are you going to do?" So, actually, that's the true story. And I'll tell you how the rest of the story went, because that actually happened with my daughter when she came home from daycare, and I was trying to pull it out of her what was going on with her to make her so sad. And she finally came out with it, and my wife said, all right, guy, you're the civil rights guy. You need to handle this. So I began to share with her how important it is to look at the inside. It's not the outside. And I pointed to her skin and her hair, and I said, those things are outside, and you're a beautiful little brown child, little black girl, and you know, it's great that you have all of these outside features, but really it's what's on the inside that counts. And of course, she was concerned. She was confused about, what do you mean, the inside? What does that mean? I said, it's your laughter. It's how you treat people, your friendliness. You know, you're smart, you're helpful, you're gentle, you're kind. Those are the things that are inside. That's how you want people to see you and think about you. That's how I think about you. That's how your parents and grandparents and the people who really love you, they look at what's on the inside, not what's on the outside. And I think my message finally got through, because how it was so important that I have this conversation with her, because I could see these dark clouds of self-doubt and even self-hatred and self-loathing starting to kick in, because again, she thought it'd be better to not be black than to lose the friendship with little Tommy. And I had to really, that was one of those moments where I had to really reinforce that, you know, her outside features, her skin color and her hair texture, all those things, yeah, those are beautiful, and God loves those, and we love those, but that's not what it's all about. That's not how we want to view you. So after I had that conversation with her, she turned to me and she said, Dan, are you mad at me? I said, no, sweetheart, I am not mad at you. Not at all. I just want you to love yourself and be proud of who you are, and always be that person on the inside. Be kind, be helpful, be funny, be thoughtful. All of those things are so important, because that's what's important in life. And I knew I had made my point, because she turned and smiled and she hugged me and jumped down from my lap and went off to her bedroom, skipping down the hallway to go to her bedroom. And then it occurred to my wife and me that we need to reinforce this pride, this knowledge and acceptance and love of self that is so critical at this time. So what we did was we went out and bought every black Cabbage Patch doll we could find. And if you remember Cabbage Patch dolls, those were not the most inexpensive dolls, but we wanted to surround this child with images of herself. And in addition, we went out and bought lots of black art and hung those in our house, so that when they walk down the hallway, they get to see pictures of prominent black people, black art, and all those things that sent the message that it's okay to be black. It's okay to love yourself, and we want you to be proud of it. And my daughter now is in her 40s, and sometimes I think she overshot the mark, because she's probably more radical than I am. But at any rate, that was one of my first. In fact, it was my first children's book. But again, has this overtone or this message about social justice. And I will move on to some other books that I have written, particularly a chapter book, a series of chapter books. There are 2 books in that series. It's called The Adventures of Little Mikey, and the second one is More Adventures of Little Mikey. And Little Mikey is a kid who is mischievous, but he doesn't really hurt anybody with his. So with Little Mikey, he does things, but he learns some valuable lessons from his interaction with his teachers, with his parents, and with his classmates. One of the purposes of that book is to teach social emotional learning, SEL. And it teaches themes like responsibility and respect, all those things that we want, that are foundational in building character. And little Mikey is just a phenomenal little kid, and he, as I said, he gets into things. But one of the things that a theme throughout the book is about when you make a mistake, there are three things you should do when you make a mistake. And that the first is admit that you made the mistake. Secondly, apologize for making the mistake. And thirdly, say something to the effect that you will endeavor to not repeat that mistake again. Knowing that kids are going, we all make mistakes, and sometimes we do repeat those mistakes. And that's how I throughout the book, those messages come through, that when you make a mistake, you own up to it, say, yes, I did that, and I'm sorry I did it, and I'll try not to do that again. I tell students that I work, kids I used to mentor up in Madisonville, Texas, is that if I see you doing something, or a teacher sees you doing something, obviously you did it. Everybody knows that you did it. Don't say, I didn't do that. I didn't. No, I did it. I apologize. I won't do it anymore. And I said, once you do that, it doesn't mean your teacher isn't going to be upset with you, but she will have far more respect for you. And maybe next time she'll know that you learned a lesson, but you have to be consistent with that. So The Adventures of Little Mikey and More Adventures of Little Mikey, those are partly based on the life of my son, Michael. The first book that I talked about is What's on the Inside. That was based on an incident with my daughter Ashley, and this one is based on some things that Michael did. He was always into something, and he's an amazing young man right now. Appreciate that. Let's see, what else can I share with you? I've also written in some fiction. I did a 3-book series on what I call the Fruits, F-R-U-I-T-S, the Fruits series. The first book in the series was Fruits of a Disgraced Legacy. The second book was Fruits of a Dying Legacy. And the third one is Fruits of a Dead Legacy. And this involves an egomaniac in the South. His name is Billy Wayne Sharp, who wants to create a race war. And he wants to, after the war is over, he feels anointed by the Almighty to come back and just rule the United States and just be this person who's going to, in his words, take things back to regular order, or the natural order, which is that white people are at the top and people of color are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. And he does all kinds of things. Again, it's a 3-book series, and you get to the last book, it's clear that things change, things get better. Sometimes we may forget, we may not think that things will improve, but things always get better. And that was one of the themes in that book, is that while things seem bleak, they may seem hopeless, but you keep plugging, and things eventually do get better. Let's see, what else? And then from there, I just finished a new series of 3-book series based on a couple of characters I brought from the Fruit series. And this series that I started, I finished all three books in that series. It's the Jefferson-Davis Investigation Agency. And they are involved in solving cold cases involving hate crimes. And the first case that they are involved in is called the case of Elbert Eugene Washington. The second case is the case of Moses Jackson. And the third one is the case of Earl and Rose Jenkins. And what's really exciting about this project, these 3 books, is that a movie company from Georgia is planning to do an episodic project on those three books. And the first book would be season 1, the second book would be season 2, the third book would be season 3. And they're scheduled to start filming in Atlanta. I'm not sure when it's going to happen. This is uncharted territory for me, so I depend upon the producers to tell me when they want me to show up in Atlanta to be there on set, to, in their words, to make sure that the movie is being portrayed in a way that's consistent with my vision. So I look forward to that and hope to keep you posted on it. Again, it's Jefferson-Davis, and it's interesting because, as I said, I brought a couple of characters from the Fruits series forward. Linwood Jefferson and Cheryl Davis are the chief investigators. They've had a history in Sharpeville, Mississippi, where the Fruits series takes place. And he was a police officer, and she was the director of communications for the mayor of that fictitious town, Sharpeville, Mississippi. And they, at the end of that book, the Fruit series, they became romantically involved, and one's white, Cheryl is white, and Linwood is African American, and they develop a romantic relationship, as I said, but also a business relationship, and that's how they named their agency Jefferson for Linwood Jefferson - Davis for Cheryl Davis. And quite honestly, I had no idea I was going to create this agency when I was giving them their names in the Fruits series. It just worked out that way. And I said, boy, Jefferson - Davis. Boy, I tell you, those Confederates, they would just roll over in their graves if they knew that there was an agency named for the father of the Confederacy. So I'm sure there are some people who may have read it who resented that title, but that's okay. I did it intentionally. Those are the things that are going on. I encourage you to write with passion, write with authenticity. Find out what your story is. Find out how you want to convey that story. Again, it could be a book, it could be a podcast, it could be a video, however you want to do that. It's so important that you tell your story. And nobody can tell your story better than you can. And don't even begin to think that your story is unimportant, that it doesn't matter. You may want to talk about or write about something that some challenge you overcame, some success that you had in your life, some joy that came into your life as a result of whatever. Again, it doesn't have to be a Hollywood, New York Times bestseller, but it can be something that you can proudly share with other people, and knowing that your words are there. Your words are in print or in video or podcast or whatever medium you choose to use. How does that connect to academic writing? Because those are two separate skill sets. I wrote my dissertation. I've written articles for publication. I've done all of those things that an academic does. And I think those skills are, even though they're different, they're sometimes in some ways interchangeable. It's important that you always know which hat you're wearing. Obviously, there's some language that you can use in writing fiction or writing nonfiction that you would not use in writing an academic publication. And the same is true if you're writing something to entertain your reader. You don't want to become too academic. You don't want to use language. You want to use a vocabulary that you may find perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable within certain circles of academia, but you got to find a way to just find a new way of expressing that. And I suggest using a thesaurus. There are people who have written novels based on their experience in academia as a faculty member, as a student, or as an administrator. And they have to write in a way that knowing that the audience that they're seeking is not made up of academics. If that's who they're writing for, then you write you submit your manuscript to an academic press. But if you're not doing that, it just depends on what you want to do. And the last thing I'll say, and I will stop here. I regret that I could not be with you live, to have some interaction with you. But as you go through your program, whether it's, and I believe it's all doctoral students, find something to do outside of the academic world. Find something that you find joy in doing. It could be any number of things, because getting through a doctoral program is hard work, no doubt about it. And it's supposed to be hard. If it were easy, anybody could do it. So it's supposed to be hard. But it does not have to be so stressful that you don't find time to smell the roses and do the other things. And not that writing a dissertation doesn't bring you joy, but there are other things that do bring you joy. And I just encourage you to find that. And you find that by doing so, you will find that your academic writing and your non-academic writing will actually help. There's almost a symbiotic relationship between the two, but you're able to separate and know which one is which. It can give you confidence in your writing. You know how to express yourself on both sides of that coin. And I would also say, always let somebody read what you have written, but be very careful with that, I would say, because once you have written a manuscript, I suggest to people that they send it to the U.S. Copyright Office and get the work copyrighted, because if you don't do that and you share it with somebody who reads your material, and it's not copyrighted, you haven't gone through that process, someone who's unscrupulous, somebody who is nefarious, could take your work and just put their name on it. And that has happened before. So be very careful about who you ask to read and give you comments. On the one hand, you want somebody who will be critical, tell you what you need to do to improve your writing, but you also want to be careful to make sure that is somebody you really trust. Trust that they're not going to take your material, but also trust that they will give you the kind of feedback that you need to become a better writer. That's so important. And once the other thing that there was sort of an unexpected aha moment for me when I wrote, because I took care in sharing my manuscripts with people who I trusted, family members and close friends and so forth. And I realized these were kind people, and they were telling me how nice it sounded and in reading my material. And it like most people, we don't like to be criticized. We hear something negative, oh no, but it's important to receive that kind of feedback. And so I just had to learn to accept the feedback that people were giving me, because I knew they were giving it for the right reason. So who you allow to read your material, again, be very cautious about that. That's the best way to put it. And the other thing to remember is where I was going with my thought earlier. Once those people have read it, then it goes out to the publisher. It goes out for everybody on planet Earth to read it, if it's being translated to different languages. Let me tell you, it's a different dynamic, it's a different internal feeling that I got when I said, people who are kind to me, who like me, they're giving me their feedback, even if it's a critical feedback. But now it's going out there for the rest of the world, the rest of people who like to read these kinds of stories. And you sit there and you say, oh my goodness, people who want to read this, they don't necessarily know me, they don't necessarily like me like my friends do. And you have to be prepared for any kind of feedback you get from those individuals who may go and write a review of your work on Amazon, and you say, my goodness, that hurt. And that's a different feeling from when someone gave you the initial feedback of, this is really good stuff, thank you for writing it. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to invite you to please Communicate with me if you would like. My email address is ajharris@pvamu.edu. Again, that's ajharris@pvamu.edu. I just can't apologize enough for missing the meeting. I believe it was yesterday. I just couldn't get out of the other meeting. So please contact me. I'd be happy to continue discussions with you, either one-on-one or in a group again. So feel free to let me know what I can do moving forward, okay? All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.